Recorded. Hello, everybody. My name is Lisa Callahan. I am the founder of the Women's Emotional Eating Community Support Group, and I'm also the founder of a wonderful program called Crush That Food Thing Self-Discovery System, where I help women identify their invisible emotional relationship with food through taking a journey of self-discovery. So the topic that I'm going to bring you today is about how food controls you. So stop letting food control you. And the way that we're going to go into this is we always take a little bit of a backdoor approach in self-discovery. So many times people will say food has control over me, or I don't have any control over food, or I don't have self-control, or, all of the things that might seem like they're a really, really like perfect fit for what it is that you're struggling with. But yet at the end of the day, like, you have to really think to yourself, like, do you want control to be like the basis of your life? So we're going to talk about this a little bit in a bit of a different way. But first, I want to share with you some of the things that the people who join my group come in saying. Okay, I have about 10 or 12 things here. There's over 3,000 members. So we do have a lot of gals in the group. And this is what most of them are saying when they join the group. I hear this all the time. Food controls me. I'm eating uncontrollably. I want better control. I want control over my portion size. I have a lack of self-control. I have no control. I want control over food. I want to control what I eat and when I eat. I want control over my eating so that I can lose weight. I want to be in control. I'm out of control. How do I get control over my nighttime snacking? Ideas about how to get control over the cheating, how to overcome temptations and get back into control. Feeling a loss of control, completely out of control. I have no control to say no to foods. Control over my obsession with food. How to control my cravings so that I can stay on a diet. Portion control, and one more, finding self-control. So the one thing that I want to open this teaching up with, is that you don't have to believe everything you think. That is a enormous weight off of my shoulders anyways, that I don't have to believe everything I think. Because when I look at this list and I say to myself, okay, I want to have control over my obsessions. I want to have control over my food. I want to control my food so that I can stay on a diet. Like, all of these things kind of, I don't know, they just don't have an element of realness to them, because when you're, the definition of control is the power to influence or direct people's behavior. So I kind of think about it like this. You are a living, breathing, moving, changing, independent thinker and independent human being. So when I think about the definition of control and I say to myself, okay, the power to influence or direct people's behavior, and then I pair that off with what you all say that you want, like you want more control over your food, it really doesn't make sense. Or you want more control over yourself, because what you're actually really saying is that you want this thing, this food, you don't want it to influence you anymore, or you do want your own self to be able to influence this food. And so there's a lot of contradictions in this feeling of control over versus non-control. And so what I want to do is I want to open up the thought process to getting rid of that thought altogether. And when I say this, I know that you might be feeling like, what, Lisa? No, I have to stay in control. And trust me when I say that when I was struggling with emotional eating habits, I really believed 1000% that if I didn't stay on a diet, like if I didn't monitor everything, if I didn't think about every little morsel that went into my mouth, that I was going to lose total control, because I had seen myself do it before. I had seen myself not be able to stop eating. I had seen myself be shoveling stuff and then literally having to run to the garbage can to throw it away. So in my mind, I was like, well, I know myself so well And I know that if I don't get control, I'm going to be out of control. Now, that was about 6 years ago, and I do not diet at all. And I never even think for 1 second about thinking about like specifics of what I'm eating or how much I'm eating or portion control or anything. I listen to my body. I listen to the signs and symptoms that are being given by my body. So, if I've put on weight, well, then guess what? Weight is a symptom of an underlying problem. So I'll recognize it and I'll say to myself, okay, I want to see what I'm eating here, because let's face it, like you could literally eat, of course. And then, yeah, you are going to put on weight. Your system is going to be off balance. If you're overeating something, sometimes your body will give you like an allergy to it. I know one time I had a lot of sugar around the holidays and I got bumps all over my tongue. That was my body telling me that there was a symptom of an underlying problem. And so I needed to listen to it. But the thing about control is that in my thoughts now, when I'm outside of this, is the exact opposite of what would be purposeful for like real life, right? Because as you're coming in here and you're saying that you want control over your food, or that food has control over you, and then you're taking that into a thought process where you're now wanting to either have power over the food, or you're saying that you want the food to not have power over you. Well, it actually is a belief system that I urge you to stop. So the thing that I'd like you to start to look for in your eating habits, in your behaviors, in your thoughts about food is actually freedom. And this shift in your mindset is going to cause a paradigm shift. So it's a belief system that you have no control over food. It's a belief system that food has control over you. None of it's real, actually, none of it. And as long as you're telling yourself this, as long as you're saying that to yourself, as long as you're saying, I have no control over food, or food has control over me, you will believe yourself. But there's no reason for you to believe yourself, because you're wrong. And you're telling yourself something that actually doesn't match what feels good for your real life. Because I don't know about you, but the definition of control, like the power to influence or direct people's behavior, like, don't you just want to be like a living, breathing human being that gets to make decisions for yourself, like along the way? Like, isn't it okay that you could wake up one morning and have an insatiable appetite and want to have breakfast at 7 a.m.? And isn't it okay that another morning that maybe you don't, that maybe you're like, kind of had dinner a little later, I'm not that hungry right now. Like, why is it that we have to be so regimen? I think that that's a belief system that you don't realize that it isn't one that you have to have. It's one that you've accepted because you listen to the industry and the people out there that say like, oh, we need more portion control. We need to control our carbs. We need to control our sugars. We have to measure and weigh and make everything into a specific. But you're not a robot. You're not. You're a human being. And so when you say like, I'm out of control, or I want more control, I would like to tell you to get rid of that word control altogether. And so when you're thinking about that, when you're thinking about getting rid of that word altogether and replacing it with the word freedom, that gives you a lot more options. You can now have the freedom to be able to choose how you respond to yourself on a daily basis. So no longer do you have to think like, oh, this food's got control of me. You can actually take back what is rightfully yours, which is your health and your happiness, but without feeling that urgency to be controlled by something, or thinking to yourself that you're out of control with something, because this puts you into a position where now you're completely blaming yourself. And when you're blaming yourself, it's kind of hard to, be on your team when you're telling yourself that you're at fault. You're the one that's done the wrong thing. You're the one that's, like horrible, terrible. Like you can't control yourself. You're this awful human being. That's lies. It's not true. And I know this because I used to tell myself that too. I used to dictate how I was, who I was, how I felt about myself, what I brought into the world based on whether or not a food was going into my mouth or not, or what a weight said on the scale, or how many points I got. And all of it is just, it's all like giving you a bunch of like thoughts that are not purposeful for what it is that you actually are looking for. And so I want to direct you towards looking for freedom in this. And so let's go ahead and talk about a couple of steps that you can take. Number one, when you're talking about this control piece, right? And you're saying to yourself, like food has control over me. The very first thing that you can do is tell yourself that you're willing to change that belief system. Because like I said, if you stay anchored to that belief system, well, you don't have many options, because either you're telling yourself that food has control over you, which basically you'll believe yourself when you're telling yourself that. So if you're saying food has control over me, like every day you wake up and you're like, food has control over me, food has control over me. Well, then you're going to have to prove that to yourself every day, because if one day goes by where food doesn't have control over you, but you think it does, like you really think it does, and then one day you're just like, wow, I wasn't even that hungry today, I don't know what happened, you'll snap yourself right back into it, because then you're going to be like, oh wait, but food has control over me, and you have to remember it. So you actually have to prove that to yourself. So changing the belief system to begin with, literally just like getting that thought out of your head that food has control over you, that's what we call like a paradigm shift. A paradigm is a belief system, right? And it's a belief that we have from our depths. We have the, like wholehearted belief that this is true. But what if it's not? What if food really doesn't have control over you? What if that's just a thing that you're telling yourself to keep yourself stuck? Or what if, when you say, I would like to have more control over my food, that's telling you that you don't have options, right? It's telling you that you're all loosey-goosey and that you must have control in order to feel a different way about yourself. And that's also not true. So what this word control does is it adds confusion into the equation, because it's something that we've just heard over and over and over again. And a paradigm is something that you've heard over and over again, and then you create a belief system around it. Does anybody remember Roger Bannister? He was the 4-minute mile guy. And he was basically, they were saying that if you run under a 4-minute mile, that your heart will explode, literally. And he was like, what? He's like, that's not true. And he proved it. And once he proved it, other people were able to do it as well. And so when we're looking at this through a wider lens, I urge you to ask yourself, why the heck do I believe this? What, just because I've heard about portion control and, controlling this and controlling that, and food has control over me? I know that you feel out of control with it. I do. I really do, because I did as well. But at the same time, if you can shift your first belief system and literally just eliminate the word control and replace it with the word freedom, and then say, yeah, I'm eating, 50,000 cookies, I'm free to do that. And so now it kind of flips everything around. No longer do you feel like a helpless victim, like you couldn't control yourself. You had the freedom, and that's what you chose. Now you might say, well, Lisa, I didn't choose that. I felt like I couldn't stop. There was a freight train coming after me. And I know that because I felt that myself. And yet at the same time, at that time of my life, I thought that I was out of control. And because I had to keep that belief system alive, well, yeah, eating 50 cookies was gonna keep that belief system alive. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to change the belief system. Just shift the paradigm. Take the word control out and plop in the word freedom. See what happens. The second thing or the third thing, actually, the second thing that you can do is actually say to yourself, and this is an affirmation, I am willing to change. I am willing to change. Because if you're not willing to change, then you will not be able to change the paradigm, right? We believe everything we think, but we don't have to. And that's another part of this equation, right? You don't have to believe everything you think. You are thinking right now that you're out of control and you have no control and you need more control. You don't have to think that. And so change the belief system. You have to tell yourself, though, I am willing to change. Because if you don't tell yourself that, then guess what's going to happen? You're not going to change. And you can also ask yourself, how would the powerfully minded version of myself reply to this, right? Because sometimes we put ourselves in a position, and this is really where that word control comes in, where we're somewhat in the victim's chair. It's kind of like we can't control ourselves. We are helpless. We don't know what to do. You know, food has control over us. We're not capable of change. And again, it's just not true, because there's other things in your life that you would like set your course and put your foot down and really have a passion and purpose about. But when it comes to this issue, it's like we use that word control to allow us to just be like, I don't know, not my fault. I'm just out of control, or I can't control myself, or I want more control because I'm not controlled to begin with. So either way, that word control is like backstabbing. Whether you're taking it in the heart or you're taking it in the back, it's like, it's mean. It's like telling yourself that you're not good, telling yourself that you're flawed in some way, telling yourself that you can't make some changes for yourself. And that's just not true. So we don't always control what happens to us, but we always control how we interpret what happens to us and how we respond. And so if we're going to think about controlling anything, can you try and think about controlling how you respond to yourself? When you tell yourself that, you did something and that you were out of control, and that you didn't do the right thing, and that you're so bad and awful and whatever, if you could change how you respond to it, things will change. They will look different. Right now, if you've got that mindset pushed onto that control button, well, again, you're not going to get anything else. And the more that we accept responsibility in our lives, the more we'll be able to empower ourselves, and the more we'll be able to have the freedom to be able to choose how we want to respond to ourselves with love and kindness. And so as you're thinking about this control issue, like how to take back my control, I only want you to think about 3 things, right? Am I willing to change that thought? I don't have to believe everything I think. And if I could just replace the thought with the word freedom, how much differently would I feel? If I come at this equation, if I think about this food thing from a freedom standpoint, meaning that I am free to choose, and I did choose to eat those 50 cookies, and I can choose to change that method. I can choose to learn why that happened. I can choose to look into the things that have been mistakes and really be able to understand them from a different angle through a wider lens. If we can just do that little tiny shift in our mindset, then maybe you'll start to get curious about how you got stuck in this position to begin with, and whose voices, who are the voices that are telling you in your head that you're out of control? There's some place that started. There's a root cause of the problem. And so that's what we do here in self-discovery. We take this openness, we take this availability of our minds, of our hearts, of our souls, of our spiritual self, and we allow us to reconnect with ourselves on a deeper level. Because when you're telling yourself you're out of control, oh my gosh, that's scary. That feels terrifying. And trust me when I say this, when I was in this space as well, I thought I was a freight train. I just could literally envision that if I didn't control every last morsel that went into my mouth, that I was going to be standing in front of the freezer, just eating up all the stuff. And the truth is that if I believed that I was out of control and that I had to control myself, well, yeah, anytime that I let that loose, the whole purpose of letting myself loose was to eat all the stuff so that I could prove to myself about how out of control I was. So it was me telling myself that I was out of control was the ignition. It was like the key in the ignition to start my engines, to then have to like go shooting into the, cupboard to get the cookies to prove to myself about how out of control I was. When if I just had told myself that I had the freedom and that I was absolutely not out of control, that control word is just tossed in the garbage, then I would have been like, wait a minute, I'm not out of control. Like, I have freedom to choose. And if I want to choose to eat 50 cookies, then I'll choose to eat 50 cookies. I might not feel good afterwards, and maybe I would make a better choice next time, but I am free to make the choice. And so this is how I want you to start to develop a new foundational relationship with yourself, the roots of you. What do you believe? What is your paradigm? And please, if you got anything out of this, one thing, just look in the mirror and tell yourself, I am willing to change. That really is step one. All right. I'll see you next time. Bye now.